Hello, and welcome back to the Argyle Digital Marketing Forum. My name is Brittany Sullivan with the Argyle Group. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our presenter. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. You'll be redirected there automatically at the end of this session. To ask questions throughout the session, simply click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen. Now, I'm excited to introduce Scott Mitchell, Senior Manager, Solution Engineering at ARM Treasure Data. We are pleased to have Scott with us for his thought leadership presentation titled Choosing a Multi-Touch Attribution Model, People, Process, and Tech. Welcome, Scott. Over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Brittany. Welcome to my talk today. As Brittany said, it's called Choosing a Multi-Touch Attribution Model, People, Process, and Tech. So, often when we talk about multi-touch attribution, we're talking about how to accomplish it from a technical perspective. But in today's talk, I wanted to take a step back and examine it a bit more from the people and processes side of the equation. Awesome. So this is me. My name is Scott Mitchell. I'm the Senior Manager of Solution Engineering at ARM Treasure Data. I've included my contact info here for any questions you may have about my presentation later on. Before we get started today, I wanted to start with a poll question. This one is asking about your marketing team's experience with multi-touch attribution. So I'm curious if your marketing team has never implemented a multi-touch attribution before, if you're currently in the process of implementing it, if you've done so in the past, but you don't use it now, meaning you reverted back to your previous way of attributing conversion credit, or number 4, you've implemented multi-touch attribution in the past and you still use it now. Give folks just a few seconds to mark your answer. All right, we'll go to the next slide to see the results here. Awesome. Okay. It looks like we have a distribution here. Most folks have not implemented MTA before. Hopefully this talk can be a good intro there. And it also looks like no one has kind of reverted back after trying MTA. So I guess that's a good endorsement for MTA. One more question before we get started. What dimension of implementing MTA is or was the biggest challenge for your organization? Is it the people side, the process side, or the tech side? So what I mean by the people side is getting buy-in across channels and departments, agreeing on a model. The process side being, making a plan and executing the plan, measuring outcomes, or is it the tech side? So the tools to gather, clean, process, and keep and refresh the data. All right, we'll head over and look at the results. All right, have a clear majority here that all of these are pretty tough, and then some focusing on the tech side. I won't go too much into the tech side of things today, but happy to have a follow-up conversation afterward. There's a lot of experts and subject matter experts on MTA at ARM Treasure Data. We'd be happy to whiteboard things out. Cool. So for today's presentation, I want to look at multi-touch attribution in 5 points. So the first point is pretty well traveled, so we won't spend too much time on building and backtesting the models. But from there, I want to take some time to talk about some questions to ask yourself and your team as you choose a multi-touch attribution model. From there, we'll take a look at some of the difficult conversations you'll want to prepare for, how to communicate the change across the organization, and lastly, how to know if it's working or not, and how to improve from there. Cool. So we'll dive in on the first point, which is backtesting the models using historical data. So what do I mean by backtest? So before we actually make the decision to assign revenue in a new way, we want to get a sense of the impact that this would have. So to do that, we take historical customer data and apply the multi-touch attribution model that we propose to use, so we can look at how revenue in the past would have been assigned to channels if we were using the attribution models that we propose to use. So for the data set for us to talk about today, we'll look at these 4 customers and their 4 journeys to purchase. Their journeys are made up of a first touch, a last touch, and 2 middle touches. And the channels that we'll use to interact with these customers are paid search, organic search, social, email, and display. Awesome. And that's all the data we need to allocate conversion value for many different multi-touch attribution models. I've picked 4 here for us to look at. That these aren't necessarily the only 4. There's probably as many models as you want to make, but we'll focus on these 4 here. So I've picked first touch, last touch, linear, and U-shaped. So first touch allocates all conversion value to the first touch of the customer journey. Pretty simple. Last touch allocates all the conversion value to the last touch of the customer journey, and linear allocates an equal value to each touch, and U-shape allocates some value to each touch, but gives the most value to the first and last touches. As always, the model is only as good as the data you feed into it. So having a centralized system for collecting and cleaning and normalizing the data is really crucial to this. We won't touch too much on that in this presentation, but happy to follow up after and talk more about that process. Cool. So so far we've collected the data necessary for multi-touch attribution. We've assigned conversion value based on popular models. But maybe that's just the easy part. So I think a far more difficult task is picking a model that's fair and socializing that across the organization. Cool. And that brings us to step 2, which is analyze the model according to what makes intuitive sense to your business and how it will affect your channels. Before we get into that, I want to take a brief moment to kind of orient ourselves philosophically as we analyze, what model we should choose. So, a multi-touch attribution model is exactly that. It's a model, it's an abstraction, it's a summary of how our customers are influenced to buy in the real world. We model this because we don't have time to analyze each and every customer touch point leading up to each and every conversion, thoughtfully assigning, conversion credit purchase by purchase. That would be, way too time consuming. We do, however, have time to really thoughtfully consider all of the different multi-touch attribution models that we could use, and then choose the abstraction that best represents our business. So the results of our model really tell a story. And our goal is to pick the model whose story is closest to the underlying truth. And when we do that, the budget decisions that we make based on that model are more likely to translate into better marketing ROI. And the reason why that is because we're optimizing across channels rather than within channels. We're thinking of all of our channels as a team and optimizing for the success of that team. Marketing organizations make abstractions all the time. A customer segment is an abstraction of a certain kind of customer. We use this abstraction to make it easier to personalize customer communication. A contact record in a CRM or a customer profile in a CDP is an abstraction of one of our customers. It's a summary, a collection of behaviors and attributes that helps us make predictions about the customer and how best to communicate with them. Awesome. So let's look at an example where we control all of the variables except for the attribution model that we're using to optimize media spend. So on the left, we are using a last touch attribution model to allocate our budgets. And we see that paid search refers a lot of sales, but it isn't necessarily contributing the most to revenue. Maybe it's just the last step in a sales process that is, triggered and driven by, all of our other marketing channels. The attribution model on the right, however, more closely approximates reality. That is, the model more accurately estimates each touch point's influence on conversion. This means that we can optimize for a stronger overall ROI, using this model that tells a story that's closer to the truth. So here we're assigning credit based on impact to driving conversion, rather than giving all credit to the last touch in the conversion journey. And here it leads to greater overall revenue. Some channels, like paid search, in this example, for instance, will look like they have weaker performance, and other channels, like display and email here, in this example, will look like they have stronger performance, but really they are working together as a team to earn the most conversions at the lowest cost. And so at the end of the day, we can tell that this multi-touch attribution optimization approach works better than last touch attribution because the total revenue is larger. Cool. In order for MTA to improve our business, we have to settle on a model that most closely approximates how our marketing channels influence customers to buy in the real world. So some questions to ask ourselves about our customer journey funnel. Where do customers tend to fall out of the funnel? What stages in the funnel are the most difficult for my business to move customers through in a cost-efficient way? Should channels that do this be given more weight? Maybe assigning more value and therefore budget to channels that can overcome, friction in the customer journey will result in greater overall marketing efficiency. And at this stage in the process, multi-touch attribution can sometimes become more art and maybe philosophy than science. To make the right decision, we have to, bring our knowledge of the marketing organization and analyze these models according to what makes intuitive sense for your business. Sometimes as data-driven marketers, we try to switch off our intuition and, only rely on, what we can find in the data. But, at this step, maybe give yourself permission to trust your instincts a little bit as you backtest. Ask yourself, do any of these models resonate in terms of how they value my different channels? Why or why not? Do you think that is? If the answer is no, these models don't resonate. Try testing more than just these 4 models that we're looking at. You could consider a time decay model where touch points that are closer to the conversion are given more conversion value, and touch points farther away from the conversion, time-wise, are given less conversion value. You could even layer in some of your own business rules, just deterministically, and evaluate if and how these models make intuitive sense to your business. And that brings us to step 3, which is be prepared to have difficult conversations. So you'll want to prepare yourself to have some hard conversations on what is fair. Ultimately, the end goal of MTA is to allocate your budgets across channels in such a way that we're increasing the ROI of the entire marketing organization, and channel leads will naturally and understandably favor the models that allocate the most value to their channel. It's possible that channel teams are currently getting compensated on their channel's performance year over year. So this is understandable. And looking at an example here, looking at these models that we ran earlier, paid search and social channel leaders are likely to favor a first touch model, which organic search would strongly oppose in favor of last touch. Looking at this, display and email channel leaders would probably favor the U-shaped attribution model, but they probably won't show a very strong preference because display and email tend to do pretty good, regardless of which channel we choose here. For this reason, conversation should probably be led top down by an impartial judge who is incentivized on the success of the entire organization. When having these conversations, back up your decisions with data, or at the very least, real world phenomena that you've observed as you run your campaigns. This change should involve revising channel forecasts to reflect the new model that you choose. So when setting these goals, consider adding a cross-channel team goal to emphasize your channels. Emphasize that they don't operate independently. Sometimes they have to pass the ball. Cool. And as always, when having difficult conversations, follow the rules of engagement for healthy conflict. My favorite rule books here are Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg, Difficult Conversations by Douglas Stone and colleagues, and Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. I don't have any financial relationships to these books. I just think they're good books. Which brings us to step 4, socialize this change across your organization. So we want to communicate about this change early and often, especially to finance, that the numbers across channels may start to look different. Want to explain that this is in service of increasing ROI across all of our marketing channels. We're tuning our measurement to capture more signal versus noise, and this will pay dividends over time. Or even better, with respect to the finance team, include the finance team or other teams that you'll need buy-in from when making this change, starting from early on in your process. You'll get really good input from them, and your goals will be aligned from the start. Resist the urge to revert back to your old method of attribution until you've gathered enough data. But looking at the poll questions, this wasn't particularly a problem. Enable your team to stay the course when results by channel start to look different. This might include revising channel forecasts or adding a cross-channel team goal, depending on the magnitude of the changes that you made. And this brings us to the last step, which is measure, gather feedback, and iterate. So we've made a big change here. And the last step is to observe how this change impacts your organization and how it executes. So you'll want to carefully measure KPIs before and after the change to get a clear understanding on the impact this change has had. Probably the main KPIs you want to look at are, overall customer acquisition costs and overall return on ad spend. But we also kind of want to qualitatively look at the impact to how our teams are working together. Do you see increased or decreased level of teamwork and collaboration? Foster the teamwork and diagnose and treat any unhealthy conflict. Do any of your channel leaders feel displeased with this change? Listening to their feedback, they may spot a way for us to improve the overall model. We can also really mine for insights below the surface by looking at multi-touch performance across specific campaigns. So, looking at campaign-specific cuts of the data can turn up insights about what messaging is best for drawing awareness, increasing engagement, or inspiring action or otherwise conversion. Also consider using the data that you've collected for multi-touch attribution during that journey itself. So if a customer is already aware of your brand, they're past the first touch. Suppress them from awareness campaigns and target them with a more engagement-focused message. And at the end of the day, if we're making data-driven decisions, having data-driven discussions, and measuring the impact of these decisions, we're on our way to unlocking the value of multi-touch attribution. Cool. That's my presentation, and we have a few minutes left, it looks like, for a couple of questions.
Yeah, thanks, Scott, for such a great presentation. As a reminder, the audience can still submit questions by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. So now I think we have time for maybe one or two questions. So the first one I have is, does the implementation of MTA create a challenge for teams, and is there any internal resistance?
Got it. Yeah, that's a great question. I think you'll definitely see, or should at least, be prepared for some tough conversations about fair. It's kind of it puts us in a weird spot as marketers, because we're used to dealing with numbers and data and cleaning the data, but that sort of thing, once the methods or once the models are run, we really have we're really into the people and process side of things, and we're having conversations about what's fair. And so I guess probably the main strategy there is to allow enough time when making this change to have really thoughtful conversations with your teams, hear out their concerns, and build those concerns into the model. They have really good expertise, and when you hear those concerns, and those concerns reflect real world experience, and that experience should be, reflected in the model to build something really accurate.
Great. Thank you so much, Scott. Let's see. It looks like we can squeeze in one last question. Will MTA present any challenges for an organization?
Yeah, I think in general, it's something that involves the whole company. So, definitely it, transcends, not just the marketing team, but, finance is impacted, sales is impacted. And so, I think the name of the game here is to, communicate early and often, and, socialize the, this change that we're making across the organization, why we're doing it, and what we expect from this change, and just so nothing's a surprise, and bringing the whole company into the process.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Looks like that's all the time we have, but thank you so much for a great presentation, and thank you everyone for joining. Scott's thought leadership presentation, along with all of the sessions, will be available on demand for the following week. Our next session will begin shortly after our lunch break, which will be a keynote presentation titled Marketing During a Time of Crisis. In the meantime, please explore our sponsors' virtual booths today. You'll be redirected to those automatically at the end of this session. So thank you so much again, Scott. Thank you, everyone. We look forward to seeing you after lunch.
Awesome. Thank you.